All right, we are live. We're starting now. Welcome to another episode of a film discussion. I don't really have a, or like, we don't really have a title for what this is called, so we just call it film discussion or chill film discussion. Today's episode is episode 7. Happy Sunday, happy Valentine's Day, or Single Awareness Day. Also, it is snowing in Seattle, so if you're in Seattle or if you're in the Pacific Northwest or wherever it's snowing, happy snow day. Anyway, today we have a special guest. He's a friend of mine from high school. His name is Fabian. He requested Yi Yi, which is a film that was released in 2000. So it's 21 years old now, or at least 20 years old. And it is directed by Edward Yang. You may know him because I think he directed something else. Did he direct Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon?
No,
Oh, that was Ang Lee. Sorry, never mind. For some reason, I thought he directed that. But anyway, he directed this film Yi Yi, and it is a Taiwanese drama film. It stars Wu Nian Zhen as NJ, who is like one of the main characters, and Elaine Jin is Min Min, who is his wife, and Kelly Lee is Ting Ting, who is the daughter, and Jonathan Chang is Yang Yang, who is the son. I looked into a bit of the Wikipedia's. They don't seem as active as in acting as to like today, present day, but
yeah,
just giving out some facts about what this film is about. But anyway, yeah, going back to the film, yes. So it's a Taiwanese drama film. It basically centers around this different subplots. Like there's not like there's not necessarily like a main overarching plot, but it kind of centers around like the different family members and their subplots and sort of like the life that they're going through and their relationships that are prominent within their life. But we're going to talk about each of those subplots more in depth during this film discussion because they all have different. They're all basically different like mini plots. If you will, for that are portrayed within this film. Oh, by the way, this film is 2 hours and 50 minutes, so it's
a long one.
173 minutes. It is a pretty long film, and yeah. So if you're have the time, there you go. I just wanted to let you know ahead of time that it is a long film and that it is more of a commitment, but it is. I think a pretty good film overall. And yeah, I'd like to hear more about what you guys think overall, what this film is, and how you feel about it. Starting with our special guest, Fabian. Let's do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So just overall, yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is one of my favorite films. I think there's several different things I like about it. I guess one thing is when I'm rewatching it, since I already know like the main plot, one thing that I always enjoy is the comedic parts. Like it's not a comedy, but the funny parts I really like. I like the type of humor. Like there's a scene where near the very beginning where like the father is getting something from the jar and he's like, oh wait, what was I getting? And then later that wasn't that funny, but then later the uncle comes down the elevator and then runs into Shelly and the father. And I mean the NJ's Adi, NJ's brother-in-law or something.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Oh wait, what did I come down for?" And then I was just laughing at that. Like, so I don't know. There's a bunch of things like that. Like just small humorous parts that I enjoyed. But anyway, that's just one part. Other things I liked are like there's a lot of emphasis on communications and communication in relationships, and I guess just a fundamental view that like it's never going to be perfect, and then I mean, but it can also be super imperfect, but it doesn't have to be like it can be a bit better than that. It can be close to perfect, but certainly there's a lot of like relationships that kind of don't go as well as they could have due to poor communication, I think.
I don't think any of them were perfect. Wait, I don't think any of them were portrayed as like near perfect.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay, I was like, okay, maybe on
Most
paper, but
further than, but I think there is just a general thing, like it can never be perfect.
okay,
But yeah,
okay.
I guess most of them were far from perfect. But like in theory, they could have been better, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. I guess NJ and Shelly's at the end was kind of better. Like at least they opened up. But that was just like catching up,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
on a weekend trip. Yeah, I don't know. That's the two. So that's two themes. Is there anything else I want to say? I mean, I also like the interleaving of the like 40, 50-year-old people's relationships, the teenage like Ting Ting, and then Yang Yang. Just all those ages, but there's like a similar pattern throughout them. I mean, so some of them like Shelly and NJ are reminiscing about their like 30 years past relationship. So
Right.
that more direct, but then anyway, yeah, that interleaving of those relationships is also something I thought was interesting.
Cool. Yeah. So overall, you enjoyed it, like especially the little comedic parts you mentioned.
One of his favorite films.
Yeah,
One of your
I liked
favorites.
it, and every
Okay.
time I rewatch it, like if I rewatch it too soon, I think there was one time I rewatched it after the first time, and it hadn't like not enough time elapsed, so I didn't. I think I just got too bored and stopped. But like I rewatched it 2 times after that, and just this last week it was also I enjoyed it. So yeah.
Okay. Cool. Austin,
Yeah,
overarching thoughts. I'm sure. I'm gonna guess. I'm just gonna put it out right now. I'm pretty sure you enjoyed this film more than Flypaper from last week.
Yes, no, I would say that is a true statement.
Okay, considering you gave Flypaper a 2.5 stars, there's a lot of
Yeah.
room for improvement.
You can only go up from there, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe not. But no, as you predicted, I did enjoy this film. It is a drama, and I think it does have some of the I think seriousness. No, that you can kind of take seriously with this movie. It kind of makes you think, but also I think it's also a pretty cinematic film, right? There's a lot of moments that pause, right, and then you get to just take in the scenes and just to ingest what's just happening, or take into consideration the scenery that the director is putting us in, or just trying to have some reflection of each of the characters. So I thought, there are some scenes there are a lot of scenes that are cut away that are kind of just kind of peaceful, but at the same time I feel like sometimes it kind of dragged the movie out. The movie kind of seemed a bit kind of really really long for that reason. Because I think we get to take some of these establishing shots, or just take some shots just to take in the slow moments, and just to I guess get a feel for what the emotions are that the characters are trying to portray. Everyone's kind of lonely, or someone's kind of contemplative, right, thinking about like what they can or cannot do, or what they can or cannot have. So there are a lot of moments like that. I feel like that are kind of just scattered throughout the film. But overall, this film just has, I think, it kind of, as you said, I think, follows this family. But while this whole overarching plot is about family, a lot of it has different and separate stories that we're going along. That they're kind of not really connected in that way, right? We know this family. There are sometimes points when they interact with each other, but each one has their own story point that they're going for. And then also there's the time when actually I think they actually kind of reflect each other, right, in different paths of their ages, which I thought was pretty smart, and a very neat thing to do, right? Especially I think this point comes up when the father, NJ, which is actually a name that I can remember because of my home state, but they go to he goes to Japan, right, and meets with what's her name,
Shelly. Yeah.
Shelly, right? So she meets her, right, and they're going into they go kind of, they open up to each other, and they kind of contemplate how they met, their past, right?
Right.
And when this overlay happens, right, it kind of goes back to Ting Ting, right, and how she is with Fatty, right, and their
Yeah.
date, right, and how they've been, awkward and alone, and just trying to hold hands. And then it also kind of goes back as well, all the way back to Yang Yang, right? When he is with, seeing his own crush, right? How he first sees her. I remember like they do this the establishing shot of like the lightning, right? When he sees her in the school theater, right? And it kind of goes like it's these three different ages, like when they're really, really young, kind of teenagers in high school, and then when they're older, how they reflect this relationship of these two people meeting, right? And how they fall in love. So I thought that was very, very interesting how they show that through the family, right? It's kind of like the different stages that NJ kind of went through, right, when he was growing up and meeting Sherry. But then at the end, it kind of unravels.
Yeah.
Everything goes back to the status quo, but everyone has changed, but everyone kind of doesn't have that relationship anymore, right? So NJ Shelly breaks off with NJ.
Sorry, Sherry. It's Sherry, not Shelly. I gotta correct myself. Yeah,
Sherry.
it's not Sherry.
No, so they can't. Yeah, Joe Sherry. They can't be together anymore, or he doesn't want to break his family apart. Fatty goes back to his first girlfriend, right? He doesn't want to be with Ting Ting, right? Ting Ting and feels kind of betrayed, right? Because she was kind of falling in love there. But yeah, there's also, as I said, there's like all these different like subplots that go on, and then also there's another subplot that goes with a brother, which is very interesting as well, because he has his own money problems, and it was like kind of an aside. But yeah, there's just so many different things that, going on, which I thought was interesting that they did, and I enjoy that the story that they're telling, but sometimes, as I said, some parts felt too long, and some parts it just felt a little bit disconnected. But overall, I thought it was a very good movie.
Yeah, there was you mentioned a part where I think I also really enjoyed when NJ went to meet Sherry in Japan, and then they were not really reconciling, but reconnecting. There was a part where Sherry asked NJ like, "When did you suddenly like me?" or something along those lines, or like in high school. She thought it was like in high school when he like approached her, but apparently like he actually started liking her back in primary school.
Yeah.
And then I remember it cut to like, I think the next shot was like Yan Yan, and I don't remember if it was a shot where he saw his, I guess, whoever he was attracted, or his like someone he had a crush on, whether or not that was in the lightning shot, or was that whether or not that was in the pool shot where he just looked at her as she swam. But regardless of whether or not I did like how it cut to like, this is like Yang Yang is basically like almost like following in the footsteps of his dad. In terms of like this crush or love relationship, first love, if you will. And yeah, I did enjoy that. That was a really nice like segue. It was very like the transition scene was very like appropriate, very seamless. And it was like good to like sort of interweave and connect all these different stories and timelines almost. Yeah. So like, let's talk. You mentioned a little bit about the cinematography of this film, and let's talk a bit about that, because I actually do want to like discuss or mention a bit, because I think this film did a pretty good job in some moments of like how it framed shots, how it basically showed us the story. And I think the first thing I want to mention is in the very beginning of the film, when the dad, in the wedding reception, the dad like picks up the portrait, and then it's upside down of his brother-in-law and the whoever his wife is or whoever he was going to be married to. There was like a distinct framing of like he picks up the photo, puts on a little like easel, I think it's called, but the photo is completely upside down. So like, to me, that was already a first indication of like this. There's going to be problems with this relationship. It's like a sort of a foreshadowing, if you will, and I think that was like a well shot. I was like, because I really like from a cinematography perspective, I really like subtlety, in terms of like showcasing or foreshadowing, or just storytelling in general. And to me, it was like that shot where portrait was upside down. That was like on the verge of like obvious versus subtle. So I was like, I liked where it was like how it did it, but to me it was like almost like too obvious. So it was like, I don't know. But I get what it meant. But there are other points in the film where it was like pretty good in terms of storytelling. Like for instance, there was a scene where Sherry and MJ were going back into the hotel, and when they were in Japan, and in the hallway there was like a flickering light. There was like one light that was just flickering on and off, like it was just damaged. And like I said, that's also a foreshadow. Like that's also a sort of imperfection within this sort of relationship. So you know, to me that was a foreshadow. Like this isn't. They're not going to end up. So like either they would end up together and like it would just shadow his like family relationship, or like they're not going to end up together. Like something, like, it's not going to work out in some regards. So that's sort of like what it symbolized for me. And also, I think this film did a really good job of using like reflection, and sort of like filming through windows or filming through like frame, like because there were a couple of shots where like for instance when the grandmother was first brought to the hospital and NJ had to go, and then Adi, his brother-in-law, came in and was drunk. It sort of like panned toward like the window and it showed like a reflection of them interacting. So it was almost as if like it's not like you're seeing it through a different lens, and you only see it through one perspective rather than like another perspective. So you only know like half the truth rather than the full truth, because you only see like in this moment on the surface like what's going on, but you don't really see what's happening behind doors. And that sort of actually like segues to like a shot where Yan Yan and his dad were in the car, and he was talking about like how do you know what other people see? Like can you, like how do you know the full truth if you can only see what's in front of you and not what's behind you? So like I think that's what this whole film kind of like is thematically represented, is like sort of like what you see versus what is actual reality,
Right.
and like what you almost like expectations versus reality in terms of like certain degrees of like relationships or life in general. And the fact that you can never know like the full truth of something, even if you like, I don't know, see it through as much as you can through your own way, through your own lens. You like there's no way to ever like see necessarily the full truth, because you can never see the back of your head.
That's the reason, right?
So,
that Yang Yang takes all those pictures, right,
right,
of the back of people's heads, and gives a fuller perspective. That's true. Actually, I think you make a very good point about that, like expectation versus reality, and seeing how the half side. And I never really got connected that until you brought it up. But you're right. Like that's the reason why I think the message kind of hits home right at the end when we see the pictures. But all of the film, as you said, like you see a different framing. And I think what actually I didn't really notice it until you brought it up. But I think that's right. You see all these different how characters look through a frame of different perspective, and what stood out to me actually, another aspect was Ting Ting, right? How she sees the relationship between her friend and Fatty, right? And the first time we see it, right, she's on the balcony looking down and seeing the relationship, how they're happy and whatnot, right? And then we also see her, the relationship when they're going on to hanging out and waiting for the Fatty to meet with the girl, the other friend, right? But I think you're right. I think that kind of, after you said that kind of stuck out, like, oh yeah, we only see that perspective, and then we see how that they maybe don't gel along. And you're right. It's just different perspective. Like how do you see it, and now like once you actually get into it, how maybe it's not as perfect as they thought it would be, right? So you bring a really, really good point with that, and especially you're right. I think the cinematography does subtly portray that kind of theme going along with it, which is very interesting when a director is able to put those two together, marry it, right, the story and plot, as well as like how they visually present it in the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
And for me, that whole like you only know the half truth sort of also goes back to the communication thing. Like I think it sort of applies to Sherry and Enzo too, where they didn't know the other side, right? They had these very different sides of how their relationship ended. MJ was talking about how Sherry kept pushing him to be an engineer, and that pressure was like that he didn't want, and it was coming from someone he loved. While Sherry, I mean, well, NJ just disappeared on her, so so I mean, like finally after 30 years, they know a little bit more about like what was going on back then, but like there's still this distance, and I think a lot of the distance is like it's like what the half truth is about is really about like knowing someone. Like you can't really know 100% of someone. All you know is what they tell you, and what you see them, like what actions you see them do, but you can't get inside their head. So I mean, there's a
not yet, at least. Yeah, technology these days. One day, I'm just kidding. But no, yeah, basic, yeah. I think with any relationship film, like it's always like what you mentioned, Fabian, about like like communication is really important. I think in terms of like I feel like a lot of like poor relationships that you see on film like could sort of resolved in a sense if there was better communication between the two. At least like from portrayal of like how the relationship unfolds, because like at least a lot of the drama films that are kind of unfold, you never really see like the full story. You kind of see bits and parts of it as the time goes on, and that's sort of like kind of I think that's kind of like meant done on purpose, because like you as an audience need to be sort of invested, especially for given how long this film is, and like you can't really be as invested if like everything is already just like presented to you in like plain text in the very beginning, right? So like there might be like a reason why this communication is not there, or just because like the characters are flawed, like maybe there's something about the characters that are flawed that they prevent them from like communicating effectively. But essentially, it was nice to know like why MJ like left after 30 years, because in the very beginning he was like this random woman just comes out of the elevator and she's like you left me, and then I was like, what the heck is going on?
And then during the whole time he was really, really quiet too, right?
Yeah, he never. It was as if he like accepted it but didn't know how to like it was as if like his words wouldn't have meant anything. Like he was trying to find the right words, but he couldn't find the right words, and like he needed more time to like really present those thoughts, or maybe he's just bad at communicating. Maybe he's just bad at communicating. I don't know. That could also be a thing.
Interesting how he like didn't say anything until the other high school friend came down, the one who forgot.
Yeah.
And then started saying a few things, but at that point they weren't talking about like something serious anymore.
Speaking of conversation, speaking of silence, I think this film actually also does a really like interesting job of presenting conversation. Like there's a lot of scenes where just like two characters in frame are just like not saying anything. It's just like silence. There's like literally just staring at each other. And like for instance, one of the most prominent scenes for that for me is like when Lily, the girl, and Ting were like Lily approached Ting asking her if Ting was seeing her like ex, or I guess first boyfriend or whatever.
Yeah.
Fatty, right? And the tension was very palpable, if that's the right word. Like it was, you could feel it, but it was complete silence. Like it was just like she asked her, pause, like a really long pause. No, we're just friends, and then just a really long pause. Like it's just like nothing was being said. So like I think. Personally, I feel like that's one of those scenes that could have been cut shorter, but I can understand why it was kept there as a long segment, just because like there's a lot of like communication that is seen not through like close-ups or just face or just through words, but through body language. And that's something else I noticed about this film from a cinematography perspective, is that there is not a lot of close shots. You don't see a lot of mid to close shots of people. Like it's mostly the full body is in frame for most people as they're like communicating. And so I think that's like really good in terms of communication, because a lot of times when people like think of communication, they might just think of like the words, or maybe even just like the face, but there's a whole body, right? Like the whole body can like communicate as well when someone's saying something, right? So like I think the film also did a good job of presenting like a full body. A lot of times whenever someone was whenever someone was engaged in conversation, whenever someone was in just communicating in general, like a lot of times, for instance, between Sherry and MJ when they were in Japan, when they're in the hotel, when Sherry enters MJ's apartment, like she's like confronting him, being like, "I love you. Like, why don't you like do the same thing?" And they're in full body frame. It's not they're not. It's not like cut between two faces or like just even like a mid shot of like half the body. It's full body, right?
Yeah.
And you can see the sort of like the. You can also get a glimpse of the physical. Well, not the physicality. There's a bit of shoving, but like you can mostly see a lot of times when in these moments when there's just pure silence, like the body itself can tell you like how they're thinking and what they're feeling and whatever. And you sort of get a sense of like that. And I think the film does a good job of like doing those big shots, those full body shots instead of just doing like just face or just mid shot.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. The way that they frame that, and yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot of subtlety, in just the way that they present it. And, as a visual medium, right? You can do these kind of tricks just to try to, portray some of these themes or try to portray these emotions. So I think you have, you're onto something there, and I think, maybe I haven't caught some of these subtle moments, but I probably caught more of the more obvious, I think, tricks that they were doing, right? I think one of them was every time that he was talking to Sherry, the room gets dark, right? And he's trying to it's kind of like descending like into breaking away from what his family life is, and maybe on the verge of doing this kind of affair or something that's kind of nefarious, right? So the first time he calls Sherry, he goes back to his office. The office is dark, right?
Yeah.
It's just a silhouette of him. Picks up the phone and calls, right? And at the same time, right, when they're in Japan, same thing. When they get back into the room, he's all alone in his room, right? It's in a Japanese style room, right? He's on the floor, and it's also he's a silhouette in dark until Sherry knocks on the door and comes in and asks him about why did you not why are we in separate rooms and all that. So those are very I think kind of obvious, but also kind of shows how kind of it's just lighting itself, right? Just the differences and whatnot, but it's kind of obvious, right, to show that. And then another thing, I think there was just one camera shot. I think it was like a tracking shot when we're going behind NJ and Sherry when they're going back to the hotel room. I think it was a very different, because usually all the shots that happen in this movie were kind of standstill, right, established, and they don't really move, right, they don't really track the characters. But there was this one shot where they're moving, when the camera follows from behind Sherry and NJ when they're going into the Sherry's room back in Tokyo. This will be the last time NJ and Sherry speak, right? So it's all I think it's all they all take it in one take, and it follows them, right? And I thought that was kind of strange, because the whole movie was kind of different shots that panned and whatnot. But here's this one time where actually it's one long shot, one long scene, just follows them, and it kind of becomes like a turn, right? It's kind of I think that's why it's also unusual, because it's kind of a turn in the relationship when they're when they make the final choice. So it was, I think, interesting a decision to make this to make this one scene kind of different from all the rest of the movie, just because of how things will start to change at that point for everyone involved. But I think it's also a turning point in the movie, because now we get to see they could have gone one way or the other, as you said before, with the flickering light. I think that's the same hallway scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, the way that the movie presents itself, the director and the cinematographer, I think very, very well done in terms of trying to portray these kind of different emotions and different kind of themes, and something I don't think we've seen a lot from, or maybe I just haven't noticed in the previous movies that we've watched or reviewed. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now that I mentioned the lighting, I do notice it now. I do notice it. So something else that I think was a bit of okay. So now we're gonna start talking. We kind of talked about the cinematography a bit. Now we kind of want to go into more of the subplots, the plots themselves, and sort of each character, and sort of get a feel how do we feel about each character, and then overall, maybe we have a least favorite or a most favorite, whatever. And actually, before I begin with, I before I began, there was one question I had regarding the plot, and I just wanted as a clarification. So at the very beginning, when the grandmother, she gets a stroke or something because she has to from some sort of activity. I think she's trying to take out trash. Is that right?
Right.
So
Take out trash.
that was because is that because Ting Ting left the trap? Like she was in the balcony, right, and she was observing like a couple, like Lily and the fatty down.
Yeah.
But there was a trash bag, right? Is it because she forgot that trash? That like it's implied that she forgot that trash and that grandmother.
Yeah, I think it's implied
to take it out. Okay.
And it's funny that they did that, right? Because go ahead, Fabian.
Go ahead. Okay, I was just gonna say like I think it's implied that grandma takes out that trash, and that's the reason she goes down. But like, it does feel like the grandmother was already feeling bad earlier in the day, and like because like it might have Ting Ting clearly felt guilty because of that, but it might not have actually that might not have been the reason that grandmother started feeling ill. Like she might have already been ill, and I assumed that she was already ill, and this was just a minor event that made Ting Ting feel guilty, but was actually the underlying cause, right?
You bring up a good point, right? Like, yeah, Ting Ting does establish in the beginning, like, oh yeah, grandmother wasn't feeling well the other day, or she looked all down, right? That could be that could have been interpreted from like seeing the brother, right, marry a woman that the grandmother didn't approve, right? But it also could have been a double kind of edge, right? Like, oh, maybe she's not feeling well because she's just not medically healthy, right? But going off of that, I think it kind of was implied, right, or that at least I never really caught that, right, when they say because the father kind of brings it up, and this is what brings guilt into Ting Ting, right? The father's like, why was she downstairs, right? If she wasn't downstairs, she would have been okay, right? And that's what kind of sets Ting Ting off, right? Because Ting Ting's like, oh, did I forget the trash? And right now, and I think it kind of also makes that doubt because I didn't really realize, I don't think I really noticed, right? Like whether or not Ting Ting, because I thought she did, because I remember like she brought the big bag down and whatnot. I was like, oh, I thought Ting Ting did, but then when I went back to watch the scene again, right, I actually went back, and you see it, right, like Lily and Ting Ting is observing Lily, right? She's putting the trash bag in, she closes it, and then after she observes it, she just leaves it on the balcony and goes back into the house. So I thought, it's just very interesting that they kind of, that was also very subtle, but throughout the movie, it just made me doubt what was happening there. But it's just like little things like that. But yeah, I think the grandma goes downstairs, and because she's downstairs, I guess either one, she's not back in the apartment where she could be safer or or and whatnot. But she's down in the parking lot and falls over just because she has a stroke or what other theory that the father nurse brings, like she gets hit by a car or something like that. But no one knows, she's just fallen over, right, and was downstairs when she should be back upstairs. But
okay, cool. I just wanted to clarify that real quick, just because I think that was like I said, I thought that was what happened because I do remember the trash bag being. I had to go back to it just to make sure. I saw the trash bag on the balcony. I was like, okay, that's why. That's why Ting Ting feels so guilty, probably.
Probably. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we have a lot of different subplots going on in this film. Just overall, did you have any of those characters? How do you feel overall the characters? Like, which one was your favorite? Which one was your least favorite in terms of or which subplot did you enjoy watching the most overall? We'll start with Austin this time.
So I would say that there were kind of 4 subplots, right? So we follow NJ, we follow Ting Ting, we follow Yang Yang, right? And then the one very minor one was actually the brother Adi, right? Like it was because we kind of veer into his the way that his relationship, and it's very minor, but it's a cutaway too, right? But and it's it's also very short. But I would say there's 3 main ones, and his is just kind of like an aside, in a way. And I see you contemplating to see how that kind of ties in. I'll try to explain that.
Okay, yeah, explain more. Go ahead.
But I would say my favorite, I think would be NJ. I think that was the most engaging and the most interesting. You just there's a lot of different complexities. And then, not to say that the others, were not interesting, right? I think each subplot had its own engaging story. If I would pick out the four, I see my least one favorite would be the brother, because that's not the Adi, right? Because that's not as developed, and it kind of sets aside. But if we go to the main three, maybe the one that I kind of was least engaged with was Yang Yang then. But not to say that I liked it, like, even though I liked it the least, I still felt like his story was also pretty good. I like all the subplots, right? I thought were pretty engaging. So I'll just go a little bit into about the brother subplot, right? It's just how he kind of has kind of we learn about the brother, like his marriage, right, to a woman who he gets pregnant, right? It's not the original girlfriend who the grandmother and every other family approves of, right? And she makes a big scene of it too, right? And it kind of also devolves from there, where the brother gets into debt, or he's in debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
To the brother to do at NJ, right? As well as he's just doing bad financial investments, and then kicks out the house. We see him go back to the girlfriend, right? His original girlfriend. He stays with her because he gets kicked out.
Yep.
And then they go to the house of the person who kind of screwed him over, and then we kind of end with him trying to commit suicide in the bathroom, right? Putting the gas on because he he feels like nothing has been going on right or correctly. And I think that kind of where his story ends is when he comes back revived, and he has the wife, the new wife is appreciative, or misses him, and he's just like, yeah, okay, I shouldn't have done that and whatnot, or he's just trying to take a bath. But I think there's a lot these cutaway scenes, and then maybe it kind of reflected a way of how back to NJ, right? Maybe a reflection of NJ, like if he chose the other woman instead of choosing his current wife. But I just thought it was it was kind of the side that they cut away a lot to focus on this brother, or his kind of his story a little bit of just where he was going, without kind of any interaction with the other three main family members that we were following. So that's why I said that kind of is like a fourth kind of subplot. But other than the main three, I say NJ. His story was, I think, the most complex, right? We get to see, first of all, his relationship of how he's right now in a family that is kind of middle class, and everyone's kind of dysfunctional, kind of in a way, and how also as I think Fabian said, there's like no really communication, right? So when we first meet NJ, or at least the first time, like, kind of stood out to me was when he's talking to his wife. His wife breaks down, is like in a midlife crisis, because she says, I feel like she has nothing, she's not been doing anything in her life, right? And what he does, he doesn't really comfort her. He just stands there and just says, oh, I can just have the nurse read to your mother, right? Instead of having instead of comforting her or trying to make her feel better, he just says, yeah, like, I'll because the mother, the wife says, like, oh, like, there's nothing I can say to my mom, right? There's nothing I can say to her to make her feel better, because my life is, there's nothing to it. There's nothing much to do it. And what he takes out of it is like, oh, okay, maybe I'll just have the nurse say some more things to your mother, so this way there's something different to hear. But I think the wife wanted to hear something else, like something about something reassuring, but he just doesn't go that route. And then he later on he meets with Shelly. But before that, actually, he has the deal with the Japanese businessman, right? How we kind of connect that these two guys bond over, because NJ is a good man, right? And is an honest businessman, while all his business partners are looking to make a profit. But the Japanese businessman kind of sees him for what it is, and they bond over it, and then it's very accepting. The Japanese guy is kind of eccentric, right? We see him playing with the pigeons in first, but he's kind of a different cut from, and did a different a breath of fresh air kind of, or different for NJ, right? Because he's different, and he's kind of this character that NJ just never really meets. And I think it's funny how it's just the characterization of this new guy that kind of brings a new kind of light to NJ, right? How he deals with it. And because of this, right, because he interacts with this Japanese guy, he gets to meet Sherry in Tokyo, right? So they move and whatnot. So it's kind of like a segue, a gateway. This meeting this guy allows him to reconnect to his past, and also try to see if there's anything that he can regain his youth and become happier, right? He talks, they kind of open up, and I think they kind of show how much that these two people, Sherry and NJ, love each other. but they kind of realize that it can't work out, or he realizes it can't work out, and he has his own family to go back to. So I thought I think it was. I was kind of dreading like, oh, this whole affair thing, but at the same time, just you kind of see this this love story play out in real time, like right now, instead of like how how they first met. You see how they kind of reconnect, and you kind of live it through the way that they're telling each other and how they're opening up and recounting the past. So I thought that was interesting and well developed between the relationship between these two characters. I really like that. And then we come to the end where he realizes he tries to call her and she's absconded, right? Because she realizes it can never work out. So there's no point in like having that pain go forward if she can't be with him and whatnot. So and he comes back home and the story kind of ends from there. So I thought NJ's story was the most engaging. And then obviously there's the other two, but maybe I think I've talked a lot about it, so we can maybe focus on NJ's subplot and where you guys think about it overall.
NJ specifically. I was gonna say I actually found like all of the subplots interesting, except maybe the least one was Lily, Ting Ting, and that boyfriend. But yeah, I actually liked even Adi's stuff with Sherry and the ex-girlfriend / wife. I thought all of those characters involved in that's sort of triangle were interesting. But anyway, yeah, go into NJ's. I felt like NJ was the most, just in general, relatable character. I mean, he was definitely the most relatable to me, but I feel like in general he's also just probably the most relatable. Actually, I don't know. I don't have much else to say about it. I want to talk more about Adi's, but we can get back to that later.
Okay, yeah. I think out of the ones, I would say that like NJ is probably like, I would consider NJ to be like, out of the main characters, I would consider him to be the most prominent. It seemed like his story was very much. It seemed like there was a lot more. Well, not necessarily more focused, but it seemed like maybe it was just more, like Fabian said, it's like more relatable. There's a lot more complexities. I think that's what you said, Austin. So like maybe it's a lot more. It feels a lot more prominent. Overall, and compared to all the other subplots. But you mentioned that Adi's is like not. It's like more of like a side thing.
Yeah.
And I can see your point, but I think Adi's plot is still pretty important overall, because I think Adi's plot like the beginning of the film centers around Adi's wedding.
That's true. His
marriage. And this is sort of like how it sets up a lot of like all the different other subplots. For instance, like the grandmother not feeling well, it kind of like sort of hints at that, which leads to her stroke, which leads to like Ting Ting's sort of like own subplot, own journey. And also I think Adi's subplot also provides a sort of like a lens for NJ, because there are a lot of times when Adi's there's a big connection between Adi's plot and like NJ's involved with Adi, right, a lot, and every time Adi's within frame or within like we're telling his story, NJ is somehow like incorporated with that. So for instance, observing. So for instance, like when the fight between the friends at Adi's baby shower or baby gift thingamajig. Yeah, so like NJ kind of just like appears like at the end, like he's late or something, and he has his gift and he's just observing. And I think that's sort of like it brings more uncertainty to him as to how he should sort of like react or sort of like act with Sherry, or like what to do with Sherry, like whether or not to like reach out to her or like reconnect or like not do anything. And I think this sort of like conflict that he sees through Adi's relationships sort of like gives him more to think about, more to be like, just more uncertainty in general about like how to deal with his own problems, his own situations. And like maybe after halfway through the film, it's sort of like Adi's subplot's kind of resolved where he attempts to commit suicide. And to be fair, like that whole scene where like when his wife comes back and then like it's just like his clothes are still in the same position and you can hear like I think it's the bathtub, the running water or something in the back. Like it's sort of like the movie's implying like it's trying to tell you like, oh, maybe he did commit suicide. Like he's just implying that. But he didn't actually end up doing so. And like it's sort of actually a little bit unclear whether or not he 100% attempted to. Like it's implied that he attempted to, but like he kind of brushes it off at the end, like very, very quickly, like almost to the point where it's like, no, it was just I was just trying to take a bath or something. Like why was the gas? It's the gas company's fault. So it was like, it's sort of like almost like as if the film is like you don't know the full truth yourself. Like you think you know the full truth, but like you actually don't. And even if the film is suggesting it, like it's not what is actually like happening. So you like it's like he's like Edward Yane's kind of playing around with your mind a little bit. He's like, oh yeah, like this whole movie, like I'm showing you these scenes and I'm implying that something bad is going to happen, but actually that's not as serious as you think it is, because you only see you only see it through your own lens, right? Through the lens that he's presenting to you, right? So you don't actually see like what's behind the scenes between every cut, between every frame, like not every frame, sorry, between every cut. You don't see like what's happening in between that time, right? So it's like it's almost as if he's playing around with you. And another scene of this was with Yan Yan in the pool. Like he kind of like takes off his clothes, or like no, he takes off his shoes and he just jumps into the pool. Oh, and you're like, oh wait a minute, is this kid about to drown? And
then like it sounds like he's drowning.
Yeah. He screams and I was just like, oh my gosh, they just like what happened? They cut away too. That was a very startling scene.
Right. But then like the next scene, he kind of just like plops his way back home all wet.
He's happy, accomplished.
Yeah, he learned how to swim supposedly. I mean, it's implied, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Or at least learn how to stay afloat.
Yeah.
So like, it's like these it's what I really like about like these scenes where like Edward Yane's showing you like, oh yeah, like it's framing it such that like it's going to happen one way, but in actuality it's not what you think it's going to be. So it's not like you don't know, as the audience, you don't know the full truth. Going back to like the thematic significance of like this film in general, and so yeah, I don't know. In terms of my favorite subplot, I would say it's probably MJ's. But I think Adi's subplot is, I wouldn't consider it a side. I would consider it still pretty prominent, especially towards the first half of the film, because I think it's set up a lot.
That's true.
It set up a lot. It was provided as like the exposition, and like maybe in the second half it kind of died down because I think NJ's plot and maybe like even Ting Ting's plot kind of took over in terms of like prominence or screen time. But like I think Adi's plot was very like essential, at least toward like establishing like all these different relationships and like sort of introducing to all these characters and like sort of even like providing you like more of a
different lens
for like
I would say, I agree.
Yeah.
Not going back to it. I agree that Adi had a more essential role to telling this story. That is true.
So it is interesting though. I will say the film began like the beginning of the film was very much centered around Adi, and then near the end of the film it was very much ended without like Adi wasn't really involved as much. It ended very much with like NJ and even Ting Ting, or maybe even Ting Ting or like Yan Yan. Because it ended with a grandmother's death, right?
Yeah,
that was prominent toward Ting Ting, and then Yan Yan comes in with a speech. He lays down the truths at the end, which is so like the plots are all like kind of interwoven, but it seems like they kind of like ebb and flow in a way, back and forth. It would have been kind of cool to see like what happened with Adi because it kind of after his suicide attempt, he kind of like his story just got like almost resolved. In a sense that he got his money back, repaid his debt, and it's like, oh cool, like happy, yes. It would have been nice to see more how his plot kind of interwoven into the later half of the film, but at the same time, it was already 2 hours and 50 minutes, so it's like
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I my most favorite was NJ. Least favorite was probably like actually I don't know. I didn't really like Teen Teen Sub. I didn't like Teen Teen Subplot as much because I felt like it was the most like high school drama. Like it was the most like like it was just like oh one girl likes this guy and then this guy's like isn't as interested so she starts pursuing someone else and then he's like sending letters like oh I actually want her back and it's like oh, come on just there's like a lot of like immature drama like not immature but just like high school drama. It just felt very like maybe in a different time like if I was younger I would appreciate it more but at this stage I'm just like oh man, it just seems very
I think that's all right. Yeah, but I thought it was all right because it's again she's a high school right and she's kind of yearning for love right and she's kind of I think at the beginning we see her kind of envious right of her friend Lily. She wants something like that. She wants a relationship. She's always longing right. And then when it kind of falls into her lap, ironically it's with the girl that her friend Lily is seeing right. It's with that guy instead of a new guy. It's actually with the same guy that she was kind of yearning over and it's kind of interesting.
I knew it was gonna happen.
See how that.
Every day he was studying her letters. I was like, "It's gonna. He's going to send her. He's gonna give her a letter."
But then he kind of. It's also like kind of weird that it kind of turns on itself as well, right? So then he like they're about to go to the hotel, right? And they're both very reluctant, awkward teenagers, and then he just runs out, right? Because again, he it's funny because before he was just like, "No, there's only you," but in reality, it's not. It's not only you. It's actually only Lily, right? And he goes back for her. And then there was the whole. It was kind of. It kind of escalated pretty quickly with Ting Ting, right? So we see the whole kind of love relationship kind of form, and I think that it kind of reflects to how NJ and Sherry was when they were high schoolers, right? Because we had that voiceover when he was talking about the first time I held your hand, and these two were holding their hand, right, and whatnot, and you're going through the date awkwardly. But then it was just like what kind of stuck out to me was like they were going to the movies and Fatty was just saying like, oh yeah like how you can murder somebody in the movie, and I was just like, oh that's a interesting thing to bring up.
I swear if that was on a first date and like someone pulled out like, oh yeah I wonder what it's like to murder someone, I'd be like, oh gosh. Already a red flag. Already that's a flag to my book.
And I was just like, that was a weird thing to bring up. And then we see at the end of the movie, right?
He murdered someone.
He murdered someone. I was like, oh, I guess that's where it landed to. Yeah, but I guess that Lily.
Sorry, go on. I want you to finish.
Lily's whole family was dysfunctional and all her relationships were dysfunctional, right? The mom was like seeing all these other guys, and at the end we see that there's one part where she gets angry at the tutor, and apparently at the end, right, we see that the tutor get murdered, but I didn't think that Lily was also involved in all this drama with it, just that we never really saw until the end. It's like, oh wow, this is kind of crazy. It kind of all escalated into this part.
I will say that I think I did not see the murder happening. Like he did, like there was a clue, right? He had mentioned it in the first date, but I didn't actually think that he was going to actually murder the English teacher at the very end. And this is like one of those things where it's like you don't know, right? Like the film kind of like you think the film is going one way, but it doesn't end up happening the way you think. And then there's things that there's things that occur, like there's events that occur, but and then when you go back, you're like, oh, it makes sense, but you don't. It's not like prominent enough for you to think that would happen. And I think that's there's this sort of like mind gaming thing that like I said, going back to where Edward Yang directed this film, there's this little mind game thing where it's like expectations versus the reality, right? Like you think it's gonna happen, that doesn't happen. But then when you go back, and then what happens is something that you didn't expect. But in hindsight, it makes sense. Like there is that clue there. Like it doesn't happen like without reason. It doesn't happen out of the blue. It just there is a little bit of subtlety, but it's just not prominent enough that the audience, or at least I thought that was gonna happen. So I really appreciate that sort of like the dichotomy, if you will, like between like what actually happens, what you think that will happen, especially toward the audience. I think that what were we talking about before? Right, we were talking about the Teen Teen's relationship. Yeah, Teen Teen's. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it makes sense. She's a high school that high school drama romance thing is I think it's good to portray because this film overall portrays like it basically portrays life in general.
But yeah, I think life in general, also the way relationships go,
Right,
grow,
at
and
different
and I think-
stages
yeah,
of
Yeah.
life. Yes, yeah.
I guess one reason why I didn't like Ting Tings as much was just because, like, she grew over the course of the film, but like at the beginning, she was very kind of a one-dimensional character. Like she's very naive, right? And then,
yeah.
and Yang Yang, you could say
Yeah.
is naive too. But like he says things that could be both naive and very wise.
Yeah, he says things that are very wise.
Yeah,
And his dad is like, "You have too many questions," and I'm like, "Dude, come on." I'm just kidding. Like,
yeah,
I-
yeah. I thought so. Okay, one relationship I liked a lot again is like Adi's whole that whole thing, and I think the reason I like it is because those three characters were like mostly Adi and his ex girlfriend or whatever. They were
Union,
like there's some they were very
I think was his name.
there were two different sides of
Yeah.
them. Like there are a lot of things you like about them, or a few things you like about them, a few things you don't like. Like his ex-wife, for example. I mean, she helps Adi like get into that Piggy's place, like
Yep.
just out of her own time, and I mean, you get the sense that I mean they were in a relationship before, and Adi's just so careless with the money, like she has to deal with all of that before, but then she also does some crazy things, like she invites herself to his baby shower
Yeah.
or whatever, and then causes a lot of drama, and it recruits those friends to sort of argue on her behalf and make it seem like it's Adi's wife's fault that like she
Yeah.
hasn't, the two haven't made up to each other or whatever.
Yeah.
And that whole drama at the baby shower, I thought was kind of, I don't know what the word is. I liked that scene. I mean, you understand all of their different emotions. Like what the ex girlfriend did was very sort of cruel in some way, but
Yeah.
I mean, you can understand her jealousy that led her to do that and whatnot. And I guess another thing I wanted to say was with the suicide attempt, like I liked how afterwards he just brushed it off. I thought that was like, well, that goes back to the communication thing. Like now the other characters, well, we sort of talked about it already, but yeah, the other characters like don't know what exactly happened, and it's sort of that general thing of like, I think we humans lie a lot, both to ourselves and to others, about oftentimes about like more minor things like that, like about our intentions and stuff. And he was definitely like lying about his intention there and trying to, just make it seem like something different happened.
Yeah.
I kind of want to also bring up with the whole with Adi and his ex-girlfriend, right? It's interesting. Like the ex-girlfriend is trying to fight for this relationship, right? She's trying to restore it back, right? She wants it to happen, right? And this kind of contrasts with NJ and Sherry, where the relationship kind of no one fights for her. They kind of well Sherry was waiting for him, right? But they kind of fall apart and don't do anything after that. NJ leaves. But so I think it's kind of a contrast, but at the same time, we kind of show like how an ex-lover trying to go stake her claim back into the life. But I think it's just I just wanted to bring that kind of bit of an aside there in terms of like how comparing Union with Sherry and how they kind of interacted with their former lovers.
Yeah. Were you gonna say something
So
else?
So I was going to also bring up the next subplot, right? So we talked about NJ, we talked about Adi, we talked about Ting Ting, then the last one would be Yang Yang, right? Like and how
wait, we can't forget about the mom. The mom also had a son.
That is true. She did.
She had a subplot.
But what wasn't problem? But yeah.
I actually liked her plot too. I thought it was like she had a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
She went to this Buddhist temple. Like it almost feels like she's gonna get some new insight there.
And then she comes back and it's like, no, it's all the same. Everything's the same.
Yeah.
But the situation was inversed. Yeah. They kind of wrote the mom out of the story for the whole thing, right? And this allows this allows us, for one, right, to see NJ go back to Sherry, right, and I think also shows that dysfunction, right, between the family, right, the NJ is not really maybe as not as happy or in his life, and with his wife, his wife also is not happy, so we kind of see this disconnect, and I think that's because of that we don't feel so bad when NJ goes with Sherry and tries to reconnect, and we see them kind of either re-falling in love or just just reconnecting, right. And the weeks we come back, families, together again. The wife comes back, so it's all the same, like the same trouble, right? Instead of me recounting to mother about everything, it's just like monks recounting to me the same thing over and over again. But yeah, I think the wife's dynamic, Min Min, was just it was interesting, but they kind of used her to write her out. But I think her scene in the beginning, when she breaks down, was very, very important. Just like just showing, I really like the scene when she's just trying to figure everything out and trying to she realizes like there's nothing to say, and then as you guys said, like right at the end, she's just like, it's all like there's no revelation once when she comes back from the temple. But yeah, she.
It kind of reminded me of how like sometimes like one day you're like thinking about something a lot and you feel one way, but then you go to sleep the next day, like you have a different feeling about it. It matters a lot less. Like feeling from that whole thing, it reminded me of just how that works. Like some time passes and then it just resolves itself because you just changed your perspective or whatever.
Yeah. I think it also goes back to like, for me at least, like you might expect that she comes back with some sort of revolution, but in reality, it's the same thing. It's like she just accepts that, like, oh, maybe life isn't as complicated as we think it is.
Right.
Which I like can totally get behind. As a sort of like almost like a message, if you will, depending on how you interpret it. I think life is really only as complicated as you make it to be. Like it could be very simple if you choose to make it very simple, but it's up to us to make it simple. It's not like, yeah. So like I do appreciate that sort of like, at least that's how I interpreted it in terms of like the sort of like, if there is any sort of like thematic significance to her subplot, is like that's how I interpreted it as. But yeah, I think her I didn't like, for however short it was
very, yeah.
I think it is somewhat notable because like her absence does in some sense further other, like NJ's plot, for instance.
Well, it definitely furthers NJ's plot, right? Because once she says that what's all for, right, he kind of questions, I think, right? And that's why, well, I don't know if it probably adds to the point of why NJ calls back Sherry, right? Because he wants to see if he can reclaim his youth and try to make meaning out of his life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the wife finds no meaning, and the wife finds like nothing. And this, I think, maybe kind of maybe words in the back of his mind where he tries to make meaning, right? Tries to reclaim happiness, and then we see at the end it's all the same, right? He won't be happy with Sherry, even if there's a second chance. It probably wouldn't be the same thing, right? It wouldn't be, so it kind of reflects like the wife finds this message when she goes to the Buddhist temple. NJ finds this message when he meets with Sherry, and then once they leave, it's like it probably would be the same thing. It doesn't really matter if he went with Sherry or if he did not go with Sherry. So I think it kind of it's reflected in both spouses. They both get this message, and they just go about it a different way. But we don't see the way that the wife learns it, right? The wife, we see her break down, and we see her come back, and she tells us how she learns this message. But we see that message lived through NJ, or shown to us through NJ, because he's in Taipei. So
yeah. I think
it's probably been more interesting than I was gonna say it'd probably more interesting than just seeing the wife at a Buddhist temple.
We don't really. Yeah, I mean, considering how long the film already is, I don't think that is necessary. But yeah, I guess we can go back to Yan Yan, because Yan Yan also kind of has his own journey about what it means to sort of almost not necessarily not only love or like be attracted to someone in terms of his own perspective, but also just like how he kind of deals with uncertainty in a way. and how his solution is to take photos of people from the back of their head. Symbolic, because now those people can see what they look like from behind. Like they have more of a perspective, more of the truth. So yeah, I think Yang Yang's plot. Well, to be fair, it was just mostly his aunt. It was like it started out with like him not talking to grandmother. His grandmother kind of like rejects that in the beginning.
Yeah.
But then that's resolved at the very end when he goes on his speech. But then also just his life as a school kid, and I guess his crush, and like his antics, and then also his conversations with NJ, his dad. He has some bonding with him, and sort of like it reveals to the audience his like wisdom, or maybe like his interest. Like there is the wisdom in his thought, and I think that like his wisdom sort of like. I would like to believe that his wisdom imparted something into NJ in his journey as well. Like maybe not his wisdom, but his questions. I don't know. But yeah, how did you guys feel about Yang Yang's plot? Did you think it ended well? Do you think that like not just only Yang Yang's plot, but like everyone's plot? Do you think it ended well? Do you think there could have been more?
I think everyone's plot I think ended. Wrapped up pretty nicely in terms of how they kind of settled it. It seemed like sometimes Ting Ting's plot with the murder that kind of like escalated. It kind of shook me. But
yeah.
Oh yeah, no, but I thought I thought it was kind of kick change into her, and then it kind of gave her the different perspective of each person. So I thought it kind of flowed well into it. It definitely shook me. But I thought it went well with her storyline, and then obviously when she kind of has the dream about her grandmother forgiveness. I thought that was a very sweet scene where she finally kind of let go, and then we kind of learned that their grandmother passes away. So I think each scene, each sub story, kind of wrapped itself pretty nicely. I was satisfied at least with each of them. With Yang Yang, I think I originally said I didn't like his. I mean, I liked his story, but I liked it the least. But not to say that it's the worst out of all of them. I just enjoyed it the least, and I say that because I feel like a lot of times I didn't really connect what was going on with Yang Yang, at least with his story. I thought, as you said, he brought a lot of wisdom. Like there's just like different points, right? But I didn't see where they was connecting with the whole storyline because each other family member, I kind of saw like this linear fashion, and then with Yang Yang, I kind of was not picking up what was being expressed with him. I saw the points, right? That like, oh yeah, he shows like, oh, he doesn't want to talk to his grandmother. Oh, he has this question about to his father about why people are do not see eye to eye. We see him have his crush, or we see him get bullied right at school from all these school prefects and from the teacher being abusive and whatnot. We see him have his crush in the lightning scene. I thought that was really striking. It's a pun. With the theater and whatnot. And then we see him trying to go to swimming and fear of drowning, and then we see him again having his great speech at the end, which I thought was a great way to close out the movie. But for me, I did not I couldn't really connect the dots of where this was going until at the end. But still, I think that's why I maybe enjoyed it the least out of all the subplots. But it's still very good. But I think I took it individually and I didn't put it together in that way. So just how it was connected and what Yang Yang was trying to tell me, right? Each story I kind of was able to pick up like the theme and message. I wasn't able to pick it up, at least like from the plot points that they were showing us what he was trying to express there. And maybe that's just the subtlety of not me getting it, but I just this was one plot point, or one it's not plot point, one scene after the other scene that was going along, and I didn't really connect the thread until we had it wasn't until Yang Yang kind of like say like, why do you have all these pictures of the father asking, why do you have all these pictures, and the son's like, oh, I just wanted to show people like what they see behind from them. I was like, oh, okay, maybe there, but that's why for me it was the least engaging subplot for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know, I sort of felt like in general all the subplots weren't I actually thought none of the subplots were super linear. Like it felt, I mean, even at the end, like it felt like there were a bunch of fragmented things that happened, and I mean, sure, they're all related, and I enjoyed them, but like at the same time, it's sort of, I don't know, it just reminded me of how like life is full of like a bunch of jumbled up things that just happen. It's just a sequence of a bunch of things that happens. I actually read a couple of reviews, and one review was talking about how there's like the 3 major life events: the wedding, the birth, and the funeral were like really in the background. Like none of them were super. I mean, they were all prominent parts of the story, but they weren't like the most important things that happened. Everything that, I mean, there were a lot. Most of the most important things happened outside of those, like sort of things that maybe in other stories might be considered like the most, I mean, they're the most important like life events. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well. And like it ends with this funeral, but it's still sort of in the background, I feel like, and we're focusing on like where the characters are now. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say, like I feel like NJ and Sherry's relationship sort of wrapped up nicely, but I got less of a sense for how NJ's like business relationship is going to go. Like, I mean, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but like I'm curious, like what he might be working on now that he's left the company. Like, what's he doing next? There was a scene where he's talking about how like with his business partner, how I think his business partner is also starting to feel a bit jaded, and NJ's like, yeah, you shouldn't be working on something that you just don't enjoy for like so many decades. But yeah, not sure what he's doing next. But I mean, they didn't need to resolve that, but that's just a question that I'm curious about.
Maybe he works with the Japanese dude.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think Yang Yan's plot overall is like he might have had it feels like he might have had the least screen time comparatively.
I think
there wasn't. If you think about it, the only times he really communicates, like just talks with someone, I think the only things I can remember are with his dad in the car, with his dad when his dad is asking him what these photos are, and then at the end when he's talking to his grandmother, who was already dead, passed away.
Yeah.
Like other than that, there's not much communication in his, and it's more of just like seeing his life unfold and like how
in this way,
and how it's sort of like in a way connected. There are some connections for like going back to NJ's and Sherry when NJ tells Sherry that he liked her since primary school, and then it cuts to like Yan Yan liking this girl, and he's in primary school, so there was a bit of like connection there in that sense. But I think Yang Yan's plot to me had like the most even though he didn't have the most screen time, a lot of like his communication, even though it was very little, was very like emphatic. Like it mattered a lot. Like it had the most like effect. It was like as if he's like talking directly to the audience. Like the other subplots were kind of like you see these events unfold and you sort of take it in terms of like the characters themselves, like at that time. But like with Yan Yan, it felt like his communication was like, even though it wasn't a lot, whenever it happened, it felt very important. It felt as if like you as the audience were like engaged with him directly, even though like, you know, he didn't have as much screen time. So I think in a sense it felt like aloof, and like it felt like it wasn't as like interwoven or connected, but also I think it was also very prominent. Like it was one of those things where it's like quality over quantity, you know. I kind of, in a sense, in terms of like getting a message across. And yeah, I mean, I think his plot overall resolved. I think in the end he kind of found what he was looking for in terms of a question that he had asked his dad before. It's like just taking pictures of people's the back of people's heads, and I think it was like symbolic of him growing and maybe coming to understand better like what life is about in general. And like at the end he has a speech with his grandmother, and I kind of actually forget what exactly he said. Like what's the reason why he didn't talk to grandmother?
because he felt like he didn't have much to say to her, right? Because I think it kind of goes into with what mother was saying, right? Like there's nothing I can say, and I think the son kind of embodied that as well. Like there's what would I say? I didn't have any questions to ask, and you know he just I think you know he wanted to be able to you know find something meaningful to tell his grandmother, but he didn't really have anything to say until the very end, right? Until he starts taking pictures and you know seeing other you know perspectives and other sides. He kind of has that you know that's when I think he kind of opens up to his grandmother, but yeah.
I think sort of unlike his mom, who's sort of just is talking about like her life, but then feels like there's nothing going on in her life. Like I felt like his reason was also to do with he just felt like his grandmother has lived so long and she's already experienced everything, and like, repeating all that. Like his that's also I guess indicative of the whole film, where like we see the young doing the things that the old people were doing decades before, right? Like in terms of relationships and stuff. And so maybe that's also another way of the director more directly telling us like
the different life experience. I think you make a very, very good point. Like how he kind of like the director kind of makes that message and tells it through Yang Yang, right? Just like, oh yeah, like how life is, you know, kind of repetitious in a way. Because we see that, right, like throughout this, you know, different life cycles, and right, and then we see it like the very last message that Yang says, right, something about like, oh, like you know, I want to say that I'm old too, right, or he wants to say that to his unnamed cousin, right, was pretty interesting because it's just like, oh, like he wants to have like you know these life experiences and be able to tell that to you know to people, be able to say that to someone, right, to be able to have that wisdom, right, but he doesn't have it and he can't really, you know, what's the point of telling grandmother if grandmother all has lived so long and has all this wisdom? What can he impart on her, right? He can't. That was his view at least, right? He can't. But we see that you know he does have this profound knowledge or interest, and he gets that by you know taking photographs of the back of people's heads. So.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's true. Like in the sense, I mean, this film does go through different life stages, and like the perspective of relationships as life goes on. Like you see, like Afghanian with his perspective of like he's the one asking questions, he's the one who's trying to get knowledge in terms of like what life has to offer or what relationships have to offer, and then of course there's Tintin with the like, you know, whole love triangle affair thingamajig going on. So a little messy because like people are trying to figure out. There's just a lot of like, I mean, it's just high school drama. I don't know. I'm sure there's a little bit. I'm sure there's a more not verbose, more like sophisticated way of saying it, but I just saw it as high school drama. And then of course, Adi's with like newlywed again, and having child, like that stage of a relationship, and then NJ with married life, and like you know having like an established relationship with the family and everything. So like all those different stages, and I guess also the mom too. I think mom's kind of like. I think the mom also presents a different perspective on like the married life. Like you know you have a midlife crisis, like you feel so empty because you have nothing to show, and like, but I don't know, in actuality you have your family to show, but like I guess for yourself you don't really have anything for yourself. Maybe I don't know. I think that's kind of like what she was feeling. So, yeah, this film definitely does like. Now I think about it, it really does. It is like a life journey.
Yeah,
throughout the different stages of. Yeah, throughout the different stages of life and like how relationships in each part are perceived. Each stage.
It's kind of weird, like 3 of the 4 subplots are love triangles, but then, with the exception of Yang Yang's.
4 of the 5? Or
3 of the
3 of the 4. You're excluding the moms. Okay.
They all have.
Mom was very short, I feel like.
Yeah. They all have love triangles. That's true. They all ended with.
Only Adi did not. Well, no, they all ended back to the status quo.
I think they all ended back to status quo. Yep. Yeah, that's true.
So,
All bad. Yeah, yeah.
So none of the relationships, none of the relationships really changed. You can argue like Adi, like what didn't go back to the original girlfriend, but at the beginning of the movie, right, we see the wedding, so it still stayed the same. Like he didn't go back to the girlfriend.
Yeah.
Same thing with Ting Ting. She ends up not in a relationship with anybody.
Yeah.
And then NJ does not go up with Sherry. Still stays with his wife and his family.
So you guys said that for Adi, the ex-lover was his old wife.
Not old wife, just the ex. For Adi, it was just the
ex-lover, right? Okay. Sorry.
Yeah,
for some reason, I thought someone said that it was like ex-wife or something, old wife.
I think I might have said ex-girlfriend / wife because I wasn't sure if they had married.
Okay.
Because they were dividing up their finances, right? So that was kind of interesting. Like
that was true. Like,
they had investment, but was that because they were together, or was that because they were like doing business together?
Yeah, I think it's just because together, because there's the whole scene where the union, right, was telling the grandmother, was yelling like, I should have been the one to marry him. I should, sorry. So I don't think they were married at that point. I think they were just, living together, like we're together. They shared a lot of things. Their lives it seemed like we were pretty closely connected. And then he just, it seems like the Adi just, has a fling with this other woman and gets her pregnant.
Yeah. It's like, okay, marriage time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So then Union never really like. Okay, I see. Yeah, I don't think she's ever part of the. She ever really comes back after that baby shower event.
No. Yeah, like the story's resolved. The Adi and his new wife, kind of reconcile. I always like, she's like, sad over him, but and then things turn for the more positive for Adi. So
yeah,
Adi and his ex-girlfriend, I guess, sort of reconcile in the opposite way of NJ and Sherry. Like NJ and Sherry are like sort of okay with each other now. Like, all right, whatever. Now we understand each other. Adi and that person are like, okay, now we hate each other. Especially Adi hates.
Well, that's because she invited herself, right, to that event.
Yeah, so she tricks one of her friends.
Yeah.
It's like she sets up this conflict where she tries to come out as the better person. Like she's like, okay, fine, I'll leave. You're pushing me out of this baby shower. Okay.
And then her friends come in.
That's right. The whole thing.
That's right. Oh yeah, okay. I remember that now. So everyone's favorite subplots was like NJ's. I feel like everyone said NJ, right?
Well, Fabian, you said Adi? Or?
Yeah, I think I said NJ. I liked him the most probably, but I thought most of the subplots were interesting, except maybe Ting Ting's. Well, I liked Adi's and NJ's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, NJ for me. I think that was the most engaging one, just to follow, just that how it goes along. And every time they cut to it, I just I was always brought in pretty quickly, like what was going on and how it was evolving. So
I did like his interactions with the Japanese guy. I enjoyed those.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
It was like, wow, it's like they're a couple of buddies just talking about life. They connected very quickly too.
They did. It was like the Japanese guy kind of saw him. So you are a good man.
You are good. Yeah, it's like I don't think it's gonna work out business, and he's like, you're a good man. You don't need to tell a lie or something. He like reads right through it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he kind of just sees everything. Right? Yeah, and it's funny because he has the deck of, he used the analogy of the deck of cards. He's like, I'm not a magician and whatnot, but it's just like I can see things as it is and whatnot. And then he's like, your business trying to find someone who can fix everything, and I can't do that. I just saw the Japanese guy, the Japanese businessman, the partner. I think was a very kind of a comedy character, but at the same time, kind of plays a role in terms of as I said before, enlightening NJ into different aspects that he hasn't been seeing it before in his life. So.
And he's the one who reconnected Sherry and them, I think.
Exactly. He kind of opens up that kind of the pathway and helps him explore it and then come to his own conclusions afterwards.
I'm not gonna lie. When NJ reconnected with Sherry, I had a double take because I was like, wait, is this the same woman that he ran into the elevator at the very beginning? Because it looked different. Like that, I think she had a different
Very
haircut.
different.
Like she had shorter hair back then.
Yeah.
Like her hair was up to the bun.
Yeah.
In the first one, and then she had shorter one. I was like, wait a minute, this is the same woman, right? And yeah, it was the same woman. So it was all good. Yeah, I mean this overall this film was like, I think I enjoyed. I mean it was long, but
It was.
I think did it so I guess we're getting into like the more closing statements. Overall opinions, thoughts. How did
One
you?
last thing I want to say is the languages. I thought it just represented like the diversity. Like there was 4 languages, I think. Most of it was Mandarin, but then there was like Taiwanese, Hokkien.
Oh yeah, there was Taiwan. Yeah, between NJ and Sherry. Yeah.
Sherry primarily.
Yeah.
And there's English between NJ and the Japanese Oda.
True.
Yeah.
And then finally Japanese, which was just the Japanese. Translation during the business meeting. Like, they even had that going on.
Yeah. Oh, you just want to say that there are 4 languages?
Yeah. Well,
I thought it was like I liked that part. I don't know why, but I thought it was kind of nice.
I thought that was interesting how they broke back into English, right? At least when they were doing the communication between the business meeting, right? Like always when we were with the Japanese businessman, right? It was always in English, right? It's a different dynamic, a different way that they express themselves and got the message. I don't know if how different from it was from Taiwanese in terms of like what they were trying to express, but I think it's trying to get a different element, a different maybe the Japanese guy was as well as we said, a gateway, a different breath of air. For NJ, and so speaking English was kind of like a change in pace, right? A change in the way that the dialogue was being, presented to us. And I thought that English was pretty good. Usually, sometimes when a foreign film breaks into English, it's not like can be kind of corny or just it doesn't work too well. But I thought the English here, like you have 2 guys who don't speak it natively, but they're able to express their ideas. I think in a very great way that as an English speaker, made sense and just wasn't corny or cheesy at all.
Right. So like, yeah. So like, I think the thing about this film was that like, I guess overall, like, did everyone enjoy the ending of the film, or like, if you could change something about it, what would you change to make it better, in your opinion? And also, like, how would you rate the film? So, I'll start with Fabian.
I don't know. Like I can't think of anything specific that I would change. I agree with the sentiment that a lot of this cuts were super prolonged, and that I don't think they needed to be. I think they could have cut it down, and maybe that would have reduced like an hour. Probably. It's possible.
Maybe
But
30 minutes. At least like 30 minutes. I think it could have been like a 2-hour, 30-minute film.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like easily.
Despite that, I really enjoyed all of the different characters and the different dynamics going on with each individual one. Like there's a lot of them were conflicted, like in the sense that they had a complex personality. And I like I said in the beginning, the whole communication between humans kind of thing where like we can't really understand someone fully. And I just, whenever I'm rewatching it, like not so much the first time, but whenever I'm rewatching it, it's just like I'm laughing a lot of the time because the new thing that I forget is the funny scenes that happen, which are sort of underlying. I mean, not underlying, but they're just scattered throughout. In terms of rating, I don't know what rating, but I mean, like I said in the beginning, it's one of my top 10 films, I think, that I like. I'm not really sure why. Like I've said some reasons, but I guess also it's set in Taiwan, and I like that because I'm half Taiwanese.
Whoa.
Yeah. I know a specific rating, so I'll skip on the rating.
You have a rating? You're not gonna rate it?
I rated it plus thumbs up.
Thumbs up. All right. Okay. What about you, Austin?
Yeah, I really did enjoy this movie. And I think in terms of the ending, I really liked how it ended. I thought it was done really, really well. So I don't think there would be anything I would change to the ending. in terms of like when Yang Yang goes in and makes his kind of last words and monologues to his grandmother. I thought it kind of closes down. We see the reactions of the family, and so I like the way that it kind of and it ends kind of immediately right after he kind of tells his grandmother his final parting words. So nothing I would change there. But throughout the movie, I think, as I think we've all touched upon, it was a bit long. There's some cuts, but I also liked it because it kind of had some of these like slow moments in terms of allowing us to reflect and appreciate the thoughts and insights, and it's just a visual way to showcase that, right? So while I do think maybe some of the scenes could be shortened, I don't know if I would take it out completely, because it gives us some establishing shots I think that worked in the film, and especially as a film, it's a visual medium, right? So we should be able to see some of these background shots and how kind of allow us to sit and reflect. But there were times I feel like it could be maybe cut and it made a bit shorter. But other things I would improve, I don't know if I would say that there's something too major. Maybe just in terms of like how the plot points fall, and maybe making the families more interconnected, because each subplot was pretty independent, right? We don't really see this family interact with each other. It's not until the end where we see kind of everyone come back together. But at the same time, I thought, it's just for a film about family, like many of these scenes, that everyone kind of went on their own way. And it kind of felt like it was kind of episodic, right? Because each scene, we kind of see like each family go to its own, subplot, and goes through their own drama. And then, once something, once the drama falls, then we go to the next family member, and then to the next family member. And then we go, just rise and fall between each different family members. And, instead of being one whole movie, it kind of felt maybe it was like 3 or 4 different movies kind of combined into this whole plot. So I think maybe having some more interconnection would have been nicer. But this film always had I think kept me engaged pretty much for the whole way. There's some scenes maybe kept a little slow. But not an overall criticism of that. It's just I think seeing the family being more interactive, I think would have been nice, and just maybe making just a bit shorter, because it is a very long film. Just to sit through. So I think as a rating, I would give it, I think, an 8. I think I think some of the storylines could have been maybe more. I think with Ting Ting and with Yang Yang, I think it could have been more refined. And we talked. You guys touched a lot about Ting Ting, and I think I kind of agree. Like sometimes it kind of was just a high school drama, and then Yang Yang myself, I just never really picked up a lot that was going on. I think it could have been getting more engaging. I think I could have gotten more with Yang Yang if he interacted more with much of the family. But it was a very good film. Very, very good film. So I think my rating for this would be an 8.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So I guess for my comments, this is, once again, it's a long film. I think it could be shorter. Some of the long cuts could be definitely made. Like for instance, there's certain cuts. Like there's a scene of a train when Jay goes to Japan, and there's a scene of like he's on the train in transit, and it's a long shot of like his transit as he's staring off into the Japanese or Tokyo city. They do play some really nice music in the background, but like it's a very long scene. That's a very long shot. It was to the point where I was like, wow, this shot is very long. Like in my mind, I was thinking this shot is very long, which to me is not. To me, it's like, oh wow, like it's taking me out of the immersion. Like it's not like ruining, but it's taking me out of the movie. So I think some of those shots where like you just see a lot of like not necessarily B footage, but like maybe like in that case it was kind of like B footage, but like that could have been shorter. I think some of the more tense scenes, like the one between Lily and Ting Ting, where they just stare at each other. I feel like that could have been a bit shorter too, but I can understand why the whole scene is there, because it's as if they are having a conversation, but you're like you don't really know, like you're not for like the body language is there, and you can sense that there's tension. You sense that like there's there's no need for words for their like conversation, even though they're silent. But yeah, just a couple of these scenes where it just feels like it lingers a bit longer than I maybe I'm comfortable with, but maybe that's the purpose of it. But in any case, it is a long film, and I feel like um, to cut some of these scenes and make it shots to make it shorter would be to make would I think improve like that feeling of like at least the feeling that I got where like it just felt too long. I don't know. Like almost like it was exhausting to watch at some points. Yeah, I think now that I'm like we were talking about it more, there's a lot more of like there's a lot more that I like about this film than I thought I would. There was like a couple of scenes, for instance, where like it's hinting, like in terms of cinematography, it's hinting at something. Like for instance, the upside down portrait at the beginning, it's like hinting that there's gonna
Yeah.
that like it's not perfect, that Adi and this relationship between Adi and his wife is not going to be like, you know, there's going to be some conflict, and of course you see that conflict unfold. But yeah, I mean it's hinting at that, but I appreciate like I really like subtle points of like when the director's trying to like subtly tell you that there's some foreshadow, that there's some sort of like there's something off, you know, and I feel like that was a little too obvious for me at least. I don't know, and then like, but that's not like I can understand why it's there. It's not like oh my gosh this film is not bad because of that one specific shot. No, it's just more of like a nuanced criticism. Not really criticism, just nuanced opinion that I have about that particular framing of shot. But yeah, I think I would have liked to see like Adi's relationship a little bit more in the later half because I feel like he just kind of like in the first half just it got resolved and then all of a sudden like in the second half there's no more of it and especially because his relationship, his wedding set up the entire basically helped set up the entire film, helps set up these characters and like make you care about them in the very beginning. It's like the exposition. So I would have liked to see that, but at the same time it's like I didn't really want to see the film to be longer than it already was. So it was interesting. I think I would give this film like an 8.5. Because I think it was like it would have been like a 9+ if had the film been shorter. Like I really think the length really did because I had to pause. Like I was like I had to pause and grab a snack because I was getting hungry. Now that I mean to be fair, like that's on me. Like, I probably should have eaten a little bit more before I watched this film because it was like almost 3 hours. But like the fact that I had to pause and come back and then it's sort of like yeah, it sort of broke the flow. And then yeah, I was feeling a bit tired at the end, exhausted. So like I think thematically, I think this film is really, really nice, and I think there's a lot of like, it's up to interpretation, which I really like about films in terms of messaging. It sort of showcases like the different lives and relationships at different stages of life, which I think is really cool. And it's interwoven pretty well. So like I like us like, in terms of like, would I recommend this film to anyone? Yeah, I would. I think if you are with the caveat of like being able to sit through almost 3 hours of a film, if you are able to do that and you want to see like a drama or about relationships or just like family drama in general unfold throughout different stages of like the different parts of the family, yeah, I think this film is like definitely very well executed and I would recommend it. How would you guys recommend it?
Yeah, definitely. I think you definitely recommend this movie. But as you said, I think you have to have some time up to give yourself to watch this movie because if it's a long movie. But I think as you said, it's a great movie. With the messages it's trying to tell, and also a great movie to study. I think cinematically, right? The way that the movie kind of tells its story and the way that it kind of shows itself visually, right? I think it's a great way to study and a great way to kind of take in and how to tell a story about family and how to tell a story about the different stages of life and how each person deals with their own issues and dramas. So I think it's a good story to tell, or stories to tell. And I would definitely recommend to at least watch it and be able to appreciate this movie as it is. But you would have to put some time.
Yeah, it is an investment. It is an investment. Cool. Well, any closing thoughts before I end the stream for you two? Fabian? Austin?
Not really. Nope.
Nope? Okay. Once again, thank you, Fabian, for joining us on the stream for this discussion. It was a, pretty long discussion. I mean, it was a long film, so fitting. and I'm glad that you stayed the entire time. Thank you for that. And so yeah, this concludes the stream for this episode of this chill film discussion. We're gonna watch once again. This stream starts at around 11 a.m. Pacific time every Sunday. Austin and I, we discuss a film. We also take requests, and then we also have special guests too. So if you like to request a film, leave it down in the chat, or just let me know somehow. I don't know how you would if I'm offline, but to be honest, but yeah, like it's a chill film discussion. We do this every Sunday, 11 a.m. Pacific. We also have a YouTube channel where Austin sort of compiles an edit of it. It makes it a little bit shorter and for more like direct, just to he edits it to get rid of the noise to make it more of like a seamless conversation. And that you can find our YouTube channel at if you go to YouTube and you search for Yipatrick, YIPATRICK. And yeah. I will also Austin and I also decide what film we're going to review off stream. So once we decide that, I will update the schedule in this Twitch channel. So throughout this week, you can check out like what film we're going to review because it will be in the schedule. So yeah, that's it. If there's nothing else you guys want to say, then this is the end of the stream. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day whenever you watch this, or if you watch this. And yeah, until next time. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.
Okay.